Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I'll do like a brief couple of and then you guys introduce yourself,
Yep.
then I'll do my spiel, and then,
Okay.
all right?
No big deal. Just the first things about yourself. Remember,
Does
right?
that help? Can you see that? Liam, can you
Yep.
see that if I do that? Does that help a little bit? You can look at it. Tegan, can you see that at all? Like, just kind of know where we are? Okay. All right, everything working? All right, should we just go? You guys ready?
Ready when you are.
All right. All right, so I guess we'll get started if that's okay, like maybe 2 minutes early. Um, so during the summer, librarians, teachers, like away from the Comic-Con, here we are, like learning and things like that. It's always impressive what we do. So this is my family, so bear with us. We'll get better as the presentation goes on. But very much introverted. This is the first time my kids have presented with me, so I'm really excited. We came all the way from Philadelphia. This is my third time presenting here, so I'm not quite as nervous as they are. But this is us. So my book is actually up for an Eisner Award on Friday. So thank you. I should say our book. This is very much part memoir and part teacher guide. And it's something on the bucket list that I didn't even know was there, and yet here we are. So there's my website. There's lots of things that are on there for free. I'll share a little bit of the website with you all today. There's my Twitter handle and Instagram and my email address. So if you ever, I love getting the emails where my principal said that I can't, and that's where you email me, and if I can help you at all, and the great folks that are already out there that are doing these types of things, I'm more than happy to do so. So we will be at the library, the San Diego Library, at the Comic-Con Museum on Sunday. I was blown away. I was invited to come out and do a book signing there on Sunday, and then we're actually going to run a 2-hour workshop as a family about different activities and how to use comics and things like that. Like just dream come true type of a trip. So thank you for being here at 4 o'clock. And whoever's idea it was to go to Disneyland first, we're all a little tired. So we were there for a couple of days. And then after this, we're going to Universal. So we kind of sandwiched in between. And so, all right, so we'll get started. We'll just kind of go through introductions. We'll all introduce ourselves together. So for me, I've been a high school teacher for over 20 years now. I started the day before 9/11, which was an interesting second day at work. I am a reading specialist as a high school social studies teacher, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. I don't know very many, not only male, but non-elementary school reading specialists as well, and it's one of the reasons why I went back to school for that. I've been a social studies department chair. I resigned, probably the best decision I've ever made in my life. I am a pop culture club advisor. I am a Project Lit advisor. Of course, I am an author. I do keynote speeches and things from different organizations. We do presentations together. My wife and I have taught at the University of Pennsylvania, actually using my book as the core course and their graduate studies program. So we use, and I teach high school, and I teach all different levels. I've done K through 12 and university work as well. But for the most part, I work in the last few years in 10th and 11th grade. And then my daughter.
Hi, I'm Charlotte, and I'm going into my senior year. I basically love anything English and history. I also play violin in my school's orchestra, and I'm just enjoying being able to apply comics to my classrooms. It's helped me a lot, especially in my AP classes.
So she has taken 3 APs so far. We call her 5 because she scored a 5 on all of her exams, 5 out of 5. And she was actually just runner-up on the Poet Laureate program. So she submitted some poetry and she did a poetry reading, again, as introverts. And I'm very proud of all my kids for putting themselves out there a little bit more. Liam?
Hi, I'm Liam. I'm going into 10th grade, and I joined an art school and then going to MBIT next year to do graphic design.
So, right, so, and my kids are afraid of bragging. But he chose to go to tech school next year for graphic design, and it's the most excited I've ever seen him for school, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But he's been featured in some different art shows and things like this, and so my hope is that then he graduates in 2 years, he can do a redesign of my website for free.
Hi, I'm Tegan. I'm going into 8th grade next year. This year I joined Reading Olympics and I'm a trumpet player. I've always loved graphic novels and I'm really excited to be doing this.
And she didn't want to put this in here, but she also won, she submitted and won when we did Denver Comic-Con. Her age group, she created her own original comic and she won. And she was the first one in our family to ever give autographs, so.
Hi, I'm Joan. First and foremost, I am mother of these dragons. And then 27 years in 8th grade. I am not a prisoner. I can escape, but I love middle school. Where's my middle school people? Middle school? Couple people. Special brand of people in middle school. I've been teaching 8th grade for, as I said, 27 years. We are not leveled. We're heterogeneously grouped. And I have the usually I'm the teacher that has all of the L's, anything that's like a little bit on the different classification, we're all together. And so we're going to talk today about how you use graphic novels for all levels.
And she is the reason I became a teacher. She has always inspired me, and she's, like I said, it's so great that I get to make my family part of this journey because they do everything behind the scenes, and I don't normally get to share. So it's awesome. So I'll do a little bit of an intro about some comics background, share a little bit about my website, and then everybody will then share some of their favorite books that they've read, why they like using comics in the classroom, and things like that. So my website, teachingwithcomics.com, we put together at the very top on the waffle, you'll see the SDCC presentation. The number one question I'm always asked is, what graphic novels do I have? Do you have a book for this? Do you have a book for that? And I'm not very a rapid fire kind of a person, but all those types of things are on there. Some of the specific lesson plans that I'll mention today are on there. There's links to several PBS articles that I've written, including a lesson plan on using Spider-Man number 36, the black issue, to teach 9/11. And so that's all there for you to peruse. And then probably the most visited part of my website is the free comics part. In fact, I should probably push that up to the top. But whenever I'm given permission to share digital online comics that are great for use in the classroom, I park them on that part of my website because that's always the big question from teachers. Well, how do you get these books for your classroom? And we know how tight all of our budgets are, but that's certainly one way to do that is there are some free comics that are available online. One of the great ones, and I had a meeting with NASA, we went to AwesomeCon, which is in Washington, D.C., and it is pretty awesome. But they have a science con, and so NASA was there. And like I said, I'm pretty shy, and even going up to talk to people that I don't know is kind of tough, but they had out these comics, and we started to talk. And this First Woman comic, it's free, it's online, it can be read aloud in English and in Spanish, and it is about the first woman on the next NASA moon mission. And it's got all kinds of VR and AR, and when I first gave it to my youngest, I couldn't get my cell phone back because she's going around the house looking at the moon and the spacesuits in the room, all the different things that you can do. And I remember how angry she got because she said, well, what do you mean there's never been a woman on the moon? Pretty soon though. There are 2 Facebook groups. There's a Teaching with Comics, that's just my Facebook group, and then I started another one called Comic Book Teachers, and there's lots of publishers and authors and teachers, and so that's a great place where you get this idea or you're starting a new unit next year, and then you can come on the Facebook group and just ask us. It is a closed group, just to be a little bit, careful. So if you want to, I'll add you in after the meeting here today, if you would like to. But the idea is after this, when I started this journey in 2006, 2007, I didn't know that this community was out there, and then, here we are. So for me, this idea that about 7 years ago, I had like that year as a teacher, and it had nothing to do with the students. It had everything to do with things that were going on outside of the classroom. And I was talking to my wife about leaving teaching, really having a serious conversation about doing that. And luckily, I had a staff developer who said that I needed to share what was going on in my classroom. And my first response was, I don't even know what Twitter is. And that's what millennials do, and that's showing off, and all those things that we're taught as teachers that, we're not supposed to brag and things like that. But the amazing things that I've learned from other teachers. So because I did that, because I shared what I do in my classroom, I had an editor from PBS reach out to me and ask if I wanted to write an article. Okay, so I did. And on the day I resigned as department chair, the article was published. Like, it was just this really neat happenstance. And it made me fall in love with teaching all over again, because I figured if I was that close to leaving, I was going to teach how I wanted to teach. And I'm lucky to work in a district where they allow me to do that, where we have common tests and common assessments, but how we get there is kind of up to each individual teacher. And so when I work with like departments of education, when I work with school districts, that's my number one message is, if you want, for one thing, to retain teachers right now, if you want to inspire the next generation of teachers, we need to get that message out about how we are individuals. And when I share the passion in my classroom about what I do, it sounds kind of cheesy, but it really does ignite the kids in the classroom as well, and then they share their passions with me. So, obviously my kids, but I remember my son in kindergarten was termed a reluctant reader in kindergarten. And I watched him give up on school, of all things. And so a little bit of guilt being a teacher, I backed up the teacher because she wanted him to read those Bob storybooks, which are fine, but he had no interest because there's no story there. And so he, of course, loved all comic book things, and he loves the stories and things like that. And so I kind of took all of his superhero stuff away from him and said, nope, do what your teacher says. And then it obviously kind of dawned on me, he wants to read comics. Why would we take that away from him? And so we watched while we moved schools. We pulled him out of that school, and we have since had a very, very great journey. And now my son loves to read everything, as do my daughters. It's a passion for mine. I grew up in Philadelphia, and my two passions are hip hop and comic books, right? And I could talk about Public Enemy all day long, and that was fine. But talking about comic books back then, I would have gotten my rear end beat, right? I would have gotten jumped talking about those things. Now, like, my kids and my students very proudly call themselves nerds. Like, we've taken that word back. And so it has a lot of meaning there. And this idea that we are all teachers of reading and writing, whatever course you're teaching, whatever level you're teaching, and that all goes with all this. Sorry, Tegan, I threw this back in here. She didn't want me to put this in here. My youngest had read Sense and Sensibility. We had to have a few conversations about things in the book. But because it was in manga form, because it had that built-in scaffolding, because it had that immediate interest, she was able to get a lot of the major ideas of the story, and that then inspired her to want to read the quote-unquote real book, which of course comics are real books in literacy as well. Speak, Laurie Halse Anderson's Speak was adapted into a graphic novel. My wife and I wrote the teacher's guide for that. You can find that online from Mac Kids. And so Laurie's a personal friend of ours who does a lot of great work, we all know. And I was a little worried about, how do you adapt such a well-known, well-loved book like Speak into the graphic novel adaptation? And how do you handle that situation? I really didn't understand the importance of the trees until I visually saw the graphic novel. And I was like, oh, I get it, the growth there. But also this one particular panel here really spoke out to me. As something that I went through when I was a young child too, and this idea that we all have that beast in our guts, right? It's in there, whatever the issue might be. And so it helps me to understand as a teacher that we're all going through something, but that visualization, like I had to put the book down when I saw that, and I had to stop because it had such a major impact on me in a way that the prose book, as great as it is, just didn't. The fact that we started a pop culture club, which is loud and exuberant. We had to buy a Thor hammer to hand out And if you have the hammer, you can talk. If you don't, you can't talk. Because, I mean, you bring up like, did you like this better or that better? Do you like this? And it just erupts. And these kids know so much, and they make connections to modern politics. And it's a safe place. It's a place that I needed as a kid. And I'm glad that we're seeing more and more of these things. We mentioned Project Lit and Reading Olympics. So Project Lit is a fantastic international now book club where the kids, the students, get to choose the books, and they're all culturally relevant. They're on tough topics to read, and a lot of them are graphic novels. Reading Olympics is just like what it sounds like. It's kids in school who read from a list of books, and then they have competitions against each other and who can answer the most questions. Like, these are kids who volunteer to read books. And again, we're seeing more and more of these as graphic novels, and my kids have an advantage because the kids who are not comic book readers, a lot of times they'll skip the pages with no words. And we all know how that's probably the most important page in the book. And so when they ask the questions, they're not able to answer those things. My kids certainly can. So then again, I went back to school, the interaction with my son, knowing what I was seeing, those sorts of things. I decided to go back to school to be a reading specialist. And I kept being given articles about how boys don't like to read. I was the only male in the entire program, and I was the only non-elementary school teacher. My professors literally didn't know what to do with me. There was no textbook for that. And so my professors, we started talking, and I said to the students, or to the other teachers, I said, well, what are you giving them to read? And I'm like, I don't like some of those titles either. Did you ever think about comic books? And we started talking. And my classmates were, my professors were the ones who were like, yes, go for it, do the research, do that. And so I did. And so when I first tried to pitch graphic novels in my classroom, my curriculum developer had said, didn't really understand comics. And she had said, do you have any research on the efficacy of comics in the classroom? And after I looked up the word efficacy, I said, well, yes, I do. Here's my research paper. Here's my master's paper that's research-based on the interaction that we all already know holistically, the interaction that they have. I mean, I was a kid who was reading Stephen King in 6th grade. Right? That says a lot about who I am. And so when I got Anna Karenina in high school, that book, I hated that book. But it was my teacher sitting down and explaining that, look beyond the soap opera, take a look at the history, and it was just that conversation of looking at it in different ways, and that's what comics allow us to do. So as part of my reading specialist presentation, I talked about using the textbook, and we use a textbook in my classroom. And by the way, I don't teach a comic book classroom. I teach a traditional high school social studies program, but I use comics within that as another tool that I have. So we talked about, can we teach the Battle of Thermopylae this way? Sure. Can we teach it this way? Sure. And then, because my professors had told me yes and show me, what are you trying to do? I'm now empowered to do the same for my own students. And so when we pitched the idea of the Battle of Thermopylae, I had a student who asked if he could do it this way, and I'm so glad that I did.
Spartans! Tonight we dine in hell! Be afraid! Sparta will burn to the ground! This is blasphemy! This is madness! Madness? This is Sparta! Nations of the Persian Empire descend upon you. Our arrows will blot out the sun.
Then we will fight in the shade.
This is where we fight. This is where they die. Before this battle is over, the world will know that few stood against many.
So I've shown this a million times. I get chills every time I see it. You want to hook a kid, right? And truth be told, we know that ancient historians grossly exaggerated what happened in these battles. And so the fact that this book is so grossly exaggerated is actually historically accurate. Oh, by the way, they had to move my classroom. That's one of the reasons why. So now I'm kind of isolated, which is my classroom's loud. My wife's classroom is loud, and that's how learning should be a lot of times. So whenever we write teacher guides, my wife and I do a lot of this work together for different publishers. And I'm sure you have this one memorized. Common Core CC.1.3.5.G literally says graphic novels. And so I always say, if your administration is giving you a problem about graphic novels, if you're not using graphic novels, you're actually not following Common Core. But all these different things, particularly text to text to text comparisons, that deeper meaning in that analysis, just wow. So readingwithpictures.org, which is a fantastic organization, there's all these studies that have been done now that I wish were there when I was doing the research earlier, but this one goes back. We know that there's higher level vocabulary in comics than even in adult prose books. Sit at my dinner table and listen to the words that come out of my kids' mouths, because we know you have to be very choosy on the words that are chosen in a comic, because you only have so much space. But take a look at this. This is the prose. And then Jarrett Lerner put it in this little poster. Look at that visual literacy. So the exact same information from the exact same study, and which one are you going to remember? This one or that one? I have kids from college all the time email me. They remembered something that we talked about because it was in a song, because we watched a video, or because we read a comic book about it. It wasn't because it was on a test. It wasn't because we did even whatever, fill in the blank. It was because of those deep and meaningful connections that we can make. I have a few more slides, and then we'll get into you. So again, as a high school social studies teacher, and I am by no means, ask my students, an easy teacher, these skills, everything is skill-based that I do. I don't use comic books as a high interest thing and then we move on. I don't do it as a, hey, isn't this cool, although that's part of it. But we know by taking a look at this political cartoon. And so we circle and we annotate and all those sorts of things. And, you've got, because this woman is going out to vote, she's got the rest in B face. And from my own students, we'll say that. The dad's freaking out. Look at the cat. The cat's freaking out because, well, who's going to feed me? Who's going to take care of me? So obviously, as an evolved father, we then flip the narrative on this, that I see this as anti-male today, as anti-father today. And so we can talk about that. So these are the same skills, and my comic book readers are already skilled at noticing those types of things, whether we're taking a look at maps, whether we're doing a science lab, not me, but, or a word problem, they know how to look for those details. So before I even let my students take notes, I teach my kids how to read in 10th grade. I teach them how to read in 11th grade. And one of the things I do is I photocopy parts of the textbook first. And they have to annotate, and they have to circle, and they have to highlight. And all of a sudden now they're sitting next to each other. And if you take all these notes, that's great. But now you can compare to the kids sitting at your table. Well, wait a minute, you have that highlighted. Well, why don't you have that? But I have this. Well, I questioned that. How come you didn't question that? All those sorts of things. Visually, you can get that information like that. Where if I were to say, swap notes, I'll come back to you in 45 minutes. Same lesson, same idea, same skills. And then that plays out in, here's 2 political cartoons on a test in my academic class. And what I say to my students is, it's like math. If you show me the work, even if your answer is wrong, if you show me the work, I'm probably still gonna mark it right. Because guess what? You're gonna take a look at that political cartoon in a way that I may not. And it doesn't mean that you're wrong, right? We annotate poetry in my classroom, same skills. We annotate hip hop in my classroom, same skills. Political video ads, same skills, right? We create visuals. One of the coolest things I do is Joe Sacco's The Great War. It is a 24-foot long tapestry comic, wordless, completely wordless, about the first 24 hours of the battle. So before I teach anything about World War I, I have 3 copies of this, and I put them out in the hallway. And what the assignment is, the kids have to go through each and just tell me in a sentence, what do you think is going on there? And it freaks my honor students out because they don't know what the right answer is. And they come up to me, there's like a line, they'll come up to me, what's he doing here? And I'm like, show me the work. What do you notice? And it takes away that idea of you have to have the right answer because you can interpret it in many, many different ways. And it's cool as hell when administrators and other students are walking down the hallway and they just stop. What are you guys doing? As they're animatedly talking about what's going on in this thing. It's fantastic. And so I don't know if you can, how well you can see this, but I highlighted just some of the things, what they're able to pull out of this. It showed a soldier in the middle of cannon fire crying on his knees as he just can't fathom what is going on. There's no words there. There's just a picture, and they're filling it in their minds. People were eating, and I wondered what they could be eating. What could they be talking about? I was able to see the barbed wire and bags were used to fortify the trenches. The trenches also had wooden beams to support the ceiling of the underground part. There's things that these kids will see in that comic that I've never seen, even though I've looked at it a million times, right? And that's the beauty of all this. Why are the bombs only landing on one side? Seeing the scattered limbs reflected the uncertainty of surviving a change outside the trenches, and so on and so on and so on. And the deep meaning. So now they bring in a lot of questions because they don't know everything that was going on. Then we start teaching about World War I. Then we start teaching about how things have changed. This is one that I worked with Denver Pop Culture Classroom, which is a fantastic organization. They publish comics for free online, and they're 2 pages usually. And they come with teacher guides, and I've written a lot of the teacher guides for them as well. And you can have like a 10-page teacher guide on a 2-page comic. Like, it's amazing what you can do. But I had shown them the one artist of this one particular one on the Japanese American concentration camps here in the United States. And this one particular image was shown with the family waiting to go to the camps. And there was no tag on the people. There was no tag on the luggage. And so I sent the artist this picture. I said, you're missing something really, really important here. And so that visual literacy, immediately the hands go up. Why are they all wearing tags? And it adds this, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're making connections to the Jewish Holocaust. Not the same. They're certainly not tattoos. We're not saying that, but it starts to now, they're thinking in their head, okay, they're being treated as a number. They're being put in trains, and it helps this text-to-text, event-to-event connections. They're easy to use. I go to the comic book store every Wednesday. They're societal artifacts, right? They reflect what's going on in the world around us. Frankenstein, pop culture. Right? We know that. It was influence about what was happening around in the Industrial Revolution and all those things. No different. So as a white, straight, cisgendered Christian male, I can sometimes have really important conversations that I don't have to force down anybody's throat. And in some cases, it's as simple as putting up a panel from one of the comics. Right? It might be about Sam Wilson as Captain America talking about immigration issues. Right? It might be Batman who's caught between police officers and Black Lives Matter and the NAACP, and how does he make sense of all this and what's going on. And I can just simply put that up there and have my do now is when the kids come in, write down what you think. What questions do you have? Right? So I don't have to buy 30 copies of it. It's just one panel. We can do PowerPoint where you can erase the dialogue and what's going on. What do you notice? Why would they say something like that? Or we can cut up a comic and put it in different order, and how many different ways can we put it back together again to make different stories just by changing the first panel in this. So we can teach sequencing, we can teach math word problems, we can teach science labs, we can do all those things. And then media literacy, which was just brilliantly discussed by the earlier presenter. We see things now, like when, as a history teacher, like I thought it was tough before, when we go into the next election cycle and we see these deep fakes and we see these things that are these were images spread by the DeSantis campaign that were created with AI against Trump. And so how do we do that? How do we set off the BS meter? How do we do those things? It's all those skills that we do through comic books. Like this one, right? So it could be a photograph, it could be a song, it could be a TV show, whatever it might be. We just want kids and adults to slow down and take a look at all these images that are bombarding us and not scroll through TikTok every 5 seconds. Stop for a minute and see what's going on and what questions do you have. Good. And I'm glad, because now Charlotte can take over for me and talking about the same types of skills.
All right. So growing up with comics has introduced me to various styles of art and visuals. I've learned to turn my attention from the words to look at the drawings as well. Overall, this has allowed me to look beyond the main message and to focus on the details of the comic. I just finished reading the Spider-Man Noir, which centers around Peter Parker during the Great Depression. As someone who loves history, seeing the mentions of bootlegging, loan sharks, bank failures, and unemployment surges in the 30s, it helped me to appreciate the novel even more. In this panel that I have featured here,
Which one?
One before.
My bad, not yours. There you go.
you see a woman who has lost her husband to a loan shark. Upon closer look, I noticed that her tears form the shape of spider webs. This prompted me to draw a connection from the woman to Peter Parker, who had also lost a family member to these very same crime groups. All of these details urged me to slow down and consider why did they include that. In a classical adaptation of The Picture of Dorian Gray, one of my favorites, the novel attempts to draw the portrait in a different way that was not featured in the original. You can see an Egyptian cat with the hieroglyphic symbol of the Ankh. This symbol translates to the concept of life. For me, this increased the significance of the painting altogether. Dorian has his hand on the cat as if he is trying to claim the vigor of youth indefinitely for himself. Those familiar with the story know that his entire being seems to hinge on his appearance, and this cat represents those values that Dorian holds dear. This also foreshadows his eventual obsession with vanity and how he attempts to keep the painting from reflecting the atrocity of his own acts. The inclusion of such a small detail suddenly changes the entire way I can look at a piece of literature. I use a lot of these methods in my AP classes, especially in AP US and AP Euro. In both of these courses, there are repeated political cartoons that are used in test questions and essays. I remember the first time that I saw one, I thought it looked just exactly like a comic panel. So therefore, I used the same skills I learned from graphic novels on the lesson. As a result, I could shift my attention from the things that I noticed first in the drawing to the very corners of it. In doing so, I would take note of things that other people would miss. These show just a few of the cartoons I was assigned to look at and the things I found. You can see the titles of the buildings in the first one. You can see how the bearers are labeled Bad Trust. You can also see the White House in the background and the word hysteria written on the man's leg. In one painting titled The Fall of Icarus, my teacher had asked our classroom to tell him what the subject matter was without consulting the title. Most people wouldn't notice, but right there where the arrow is pointing is the fall of Icarus in the ocean, and it changes how you look at the myth completely because it was such an important moment, and for everyone else, it was just another day. So I have comics to thank for that.
You want me to talk about this?
Yeah.
Okay. So my kids do a lot of graphic novel reviews and things like that too. So we're not going to read through all this, but Laura Halse Anderson also did Tempest Tossed and Wonder Woman. And so being Laura Halse Anderson, she wrote in here about the refugee issue that we're going through, the crisis, child trafficking that we're very much going through. And again, it's the comic books that, and I have a huge classroom library. And so more times than not, you talk to any librarian, they'll tell you where their circulation numbers are in terms of books that are being taken out. In fact, I know some librarians who put their graphic novels in the back of the library, which then forces everybody to just go through and see the whole library, because we know that a lot of times people, adults too, will just pick it and go. But you can see here, so we're talking about the United Nations. We're talking about Diana growing up as a teenager, and so it's very relatable. And then we're also seeing just here in this one panel on the right, just the fear on her mind, the use of coloring and shading and all those different things that are going on. And so, an 11th grade AP student can pick this up and say, okay, I want to research more, as can a student on any level with reading.
So I would recommend all of these. They are great graphic novels. You'll see 1984, which is another adaptation of a classic. I particularly like Time Museum because it talks about different historical events in a fun way with these teenagers traveling throughout time. I've also always been a fan of mythology, so the Olympian series has like an afterword that shows you all the research that went put into it, and I love the art styles on that one. When Stars Are Scattered talks about refugee crises and how the US seems like this utopia for them. I've also grown up on the Archie comic books. I have shelves full of them. The recent ones have started including like LGBTQ plus topics. They've included different pop culture references, so you can just see all of that reflected in the books.
Good job. All right, Liam? So Liam, same thing, my reluctant reader who loves to now write reviews for lots of different things. And one of the kindest people to our family has been Uncle Jerry, Jerry Craft, of course, the first graphic novelist to win the Newbery Award. And of course, his books have been banned because that's how that goes. But if you read his words, I know you can't see it, so if you don't mind, I'll just read. He says, "I was also a new kid in a new school, and I felt some of the same feelings. When he is in different places, Jordan has to act differently, and I don't know why we can't just be ourselves. He loves to play video games too, just like me. It doesn't matter what color we are or how much money we have, be human," right? That you can pull this out of a book, it's just an amazing thing. And Jerry has been kind enough to, well, for one thing, give us a shout out in his newest book, which is pretty cool. It's the first time we've seen our name in a comic book, except for the Spider Slayer, if you know that's Smythe, but we'll ignore that one. But yeah, just the amazing things that you can do with comics and graphic novels. And so Liam had suggested some of these, particularly talking about the crossovers. Liam likes to look at variants, if you will, between video games and TV shows and comics, and he knows these stories so in depth, it's amazing what he understands. Do you want to talk about crossover?
So yeah, so with the topic of crossover, I decided to use the book crossover, which just got a graphic novel adaptation, but then in the TV show that just came out, Jerry Craft kind of made a cameo in it.
Yeah, there's Jerry right there in the blue shirt. And we're like, why? I know him on the Disney Plus. So you've got the prose, you've got the graphic novel, you have all these different connections that we will talk about.
So a long way down, I read in school, so then I decided to use the graphic novel too, so I can actually picture it to see what was happening. And then The Wizard of Oz, I just really like the adaptation. I only ever watched the movie, but I really like the graphic novel.
Yeah, and I didn't know how many other stories there were until he showed me the comics. I had no idea.
So yeah, even Stranger Things, which was a TV show, got comic books and graphic novels going, and then even had to choose your own adventure, and then even kind of have some novels too that you can look at, that you can use.
Yep.
And then Miles Morales, who just like had the new movie, also has his own video game, his own novel, but then also has a ongoing comic book series. So.
And a kick-ass soundtrack too, right?
Oh yeah, the music.
Yeah. So again, like all right, you're watching a TV show. Here's a book. Or you're reading a book. Here's all right, like all these different connections that makes these kids want to learn more and more and more.
So then yeah, there's also a crossover, but then also uses
Representation. Yeah. What was she? 16-year-old Pakistani American girl from Jersey.
Then just had her own TV show on Disney Plus, and it has her own movie coming out.
Yep.
In, I think a few months.
Yep.
And then yeah, I also just wanted to talk about the new movie that came on Netflix, which I didn't know had a graphic novel, but then I looked at graphic novel later, then even has gay characters and everything.
Yeah, and fluid characters and just all and there's so much more depth actually in the movie than there is even in the graphic novel.
Yeah, it had her own backstory too.
Mhm.
So. And then yeah, I also really liked Young Avengers because they're not just a younger team, but they're all like very different. like America Chavez has two moms, and then Wiccan and Hulkling are gay. So like they're all very different from each other too.
Yeah.
And then yeah, these are just like some of my favorite books that I didn't have spots to put in here, but Amulet, which is gonna have a new book soon, but I think there's only like 8.
8 right now.
Yeah, 8 right now. And then Kanto is kind of like Wizard of Oz almost, just kind of like a fantasy adventure. Wings of Fire, I never read the novels, but I really like the graphic novels that are coming out now. And then Ham Hessling is just like fun, like kind of like a cartoon.
And there's nothing wrong with that, right? And Cardboard?
Yeah, Cardboard is just like a very good standalone book. I feel like that kind of like lets you use your imagination.
Yeah, and very visually stunning too, right?
Yeah.
Nice job. I'll let you off the hook now.
So I'm actually like the odd person in the family who doesn't always understand pop culture. I mix up all the universes and everything. But as an 8th grade teacher, Liam's really good at pointing out, like, this has a new, like, American-Born Chinese, which I know the graphic novel. This has a TV show, and it's something that even if I'm not doing that in my classroom, I'm like, hey, did you guys see on Netflix, there's American-Born Chinese? Did you know there's a book? And it gives me a great chance, and he's kind of my, like, dealer over here. He'll be like, hey, Mom, there's a new one, because he'll know for, like, the next year what's coming out. But it gives me a chance to get the book, put it on my shelf, and be like, we have it, you can read it.
Yeah, and perfect. And Tegan wanted to talk a little bit about creation of comics and things.
Yeah, so after reading comics, I've always been inspired, and I want a way to let that creativity out. So I use PowerPoint, Pixton, which is a great resource for classrooms. On Pixton, you can create your own avatar and make comics. It's a really easy website to use. In 5th grade, a couple of years ago, my teacher decided to use it in the classroom, and everyone loved it. It was really easy to use, and everyone shared their comics. PowerPoint, I created a little book, and if you're scared of technology, chances are your kids will probably know what to do. And PowerPoint's a really familiar website or app that you can use. So one of my favorite books is Sisters, written and illustrated by Raina Telgemeier. The story takes place on a long family road trip. It talks about the relationship between 2 sisters. As someone with a sister and siblings of my own, many of the ideas in the graphic novel were relatable. The 2 siblings fight, as we all do, but also became closer on the long road trip. Students and I could see themselves in this book. On top of that, the graphic novel is hilarious because of the expressions of characters and their dialogue. For example, Amara, the younger sister, uses a dinosaur grabber from the museum gift shop to scratch an itch, much to the amusement of Raina, the main character. I've always loved graphic novels because it's beneficial to see the characters and their facial expressions. You can feel more connected to them because you literally see yourself on the pages of the book. The main reason I love them is because they are so relatable and entertaining to read. Whenever I was going through a challenge, like when I got 2 teeth pulled out, I picked up a graphic novel. Smile by Raina Telgemeier is about teeth issues, and the main character falls. Some of her teeth fall out, and she has to go through a long journey of healing, both mentally and physically, while also going through different dentist offices, and it was a really long journey for her. When I read that, I could see parallels between me and her. I was worried about how I looked without those teeth, but by seeing other people go through it, I was more confident.
And it's the only reason why you went back to school the next day.
Raina Telgemeier also illustrated The Babysitter's Club. If your students have read Sisters or other books by Raina Telgemeier and want more graphic novels like it, The Babysitter's Club is a good option. The original books were written in the 80s by Anna Martin. The premise of the series are still relevant today. The graphic novels share the same name as the original books, but are a little bit more updated for the new generation. On Netflix, the series has been turned into a popular show. Both the graphic novels and the show have LGBTQ plus representation. Your students might be familiar or even fans of the show and could enjoy graphic novels. When I did a research paper on Joan of Arc, I definitely saw parallels between her and Jane Foster Thor, and it's just like those real life heroes that you see in comics and graphic novels.
And Tegan she didn't want me to say this, but she dressed up like Jane Foster for Halloween, and people would say like, oh, you're the female Thor. No, I'm Thor. Like, it's not female Thor, it's the mighty Thor. It's not a male or a female, whoever has the hammer. Thank you, guys.
And again, I'm kind of the odd person out. When Tegan was saying some teachers are a little bit afraid of technology, that could be me on some counts. Also, I am very upfront with my students that while I, as an English teacher, can read through a book very quickly and very intensely, I actually have to slow down when I'm reading a graphic novel. I don't read as naturally as they do, and I have to really think about it. And I think sometimes as a teacher, we have to share those struggles with students. I'm like, that's okay. Some of you are really good at graphic novels. I'm not. This is how I read it differently. So in my school district, every year we have a theme. So I'm very flexible. I think partly it's my ADD. Poor Tim has to deal with all of us with ADD. But we've had a district theme of sense of belonging, and which is a very common theme for schools to have. And so last year, I decided that we were going to make books or comic books, and I always leave everything very flexible. As Tim said, look for the skill. So I said, you can do a children's book, or you can do a graphic novel, comic book style, whatever works for you. We use Book Creator, but you could also use Canva or PowerPoint. And again, I just opened up a Book Creator membership and tried it. I didn't know much. I kind of did went on, played around, asked my resident experts. But then I took it to school and I said, try it. And the kids helped each other, and more communal learning. They would talk about, well, she told us to do this, but there's also a shortcut. And then I put the shortcut up on my board. And we kind of learned together. And then my students were able to record them. It does have that program has where it reads aloud for you, but I actually had my students read it in, which was great for my L students as well to kind of practice the language. But then the codes were shared with the elementary school kids who got to then see my students read their books about belonging or their comic books or whatever it was. And my students worked a lot harder because they knew that it was being published, in a lot of cases, to their younger siblings. So that was very successful for us last year. I can't see that far,
And then, well, I was just going to say, I love the fact it's about the author, and a lot of your kids wrote, this is the first book I ever wrote,
Yeah.
right? And so this idea of being an author has many different meanings today, right? And then the next one is just your recommendations.
So again, I am not I'm not really great at graphic novels, but I find a lot of uses, and I'm also very flexible. We did To Kill a Mockingbird as one of our cores, very thick book. Didn't entirely love the adaptation. It's out of order. There's some parts that were left out, but we actually used that as a talking point. The other thing we did was when the kids came in after their chunk of reading, I'd use the pictures to kind of go through a summary. I love Edgar Allan Poe, have a necklace. But I've used where if I feel like my class might not quite get the story, I might do a pre-reading with a graphic novel version and then read and listen to the other one. I've also whited out, I know, old school, sorry, whited out the words and had kids fill in as we read. And I've used it as an after to just check understanding. I also look for a lot of opportunities. We were talking about, a group of my kids got together and decided they were going to read a young adult book. I think it was called Dreamland Burning, and it was about the Tulsa massacre, and they didn't really hear about that. And of course, Tim knew of a free online version, so it was a really quick way for me to stop for a second and be like, this group's reading Dreamland Burning, and there is a free online comic book. And then I just posted it in my Schoology, and they were able to go on. And then we had some conversations that, we could then have this base of understanding, gave us a chance to look at something they weren't aware of. Do one more. Almost American, is it called?
Yeah, Almost American Girl.
Almost American Girl. So I put all my books out on the ledge, and I encourage kids to put Post-its up of books that they really like or that they felt spoke to them. Well, I had a large group of L's the one year, and they started reading it, and the book is a memoir about a young woman who gets moved here from Korea. She doesn't know, she thinks she's going on vacation, she ends up living here, and it's all about her experience and also about how she uses comic books as a way to kind of find her voice. I was amazed at how many students this appealed to, because I had a lot of students who had moved here, but I also had a lot of other students who were like, wow, I never knew that the experience was so jarring. So it gave us a lot, and there was a lot of sticky notes on the board where people were like, I hadn't realized. And it gave kids a chance to talk. So I really think that that's one of the really big things about graphic novels, is that I can do them more quickly. Of course, they give the visual. It gives us a chance to kind of have a common knowledge.
Yeah, brilliant. So we have about 2 minutes. So I'll just, the only other thing I was going to say real quick, I mean, there's all kinds of ways to do it, but sometimes it's as simple as, like with the March trilogy, my 11th grade students, a lot of them will tell me it's the only book that they actually officially read cover to cover. And I've learned as a teacher to kind of let go of the giant study guide a lot of times, and I just hand out sticky notes and books. And you write down your reaction, you write down your exclamation point, you write down your question marks, and it's really authentic in that way. So that's about our time. So we will be, again, we'll be at the, and again, a lot of the stuff that I'm skipping through was on my website on the San Diego Comic-Con thing today. But we'll be at the library again on Sunday at, we could go for like 10 more hours, sorry.
We like talking about books.
Yeah, so, oh, there you go. So Sunday we'll be at the Comic-Con Museum. Again, I'll be doing a book signing, and then we'll be running a 2-hour workshop and talking a lot about those things. So again, really thank you so much, and I'm so proud of my family, so thank you.